And the aim is also made clear, although one needs to read through the rhetoric a little bit, but this point about making manifest the transforming power of the imperial virtue, I think you can imagine what that might mean. It goes on. So from the third year of Yongle, so there's our date. That's how we know it was 1405 when this first mission was sent out. So from the third year of Yongle till now, we have 7 times received the commission to be ambassadors to the countries of the Western Ocean. Now, the Western Ocean just means all Southeast Asia and beyond. That's what the Western Ocean means. 7 times. There's our figure for the number of voyages. That's where that comes from. The barbarian countries which we have visited are, and then there's a long list telling us exactly where we've been. In Chinese, of course, and there's a bit of translation required there. We'll look at that later. Altogether, more than 30 countries, large and small. So that's how many places he claims to have visited. And then it goes through each voyage one by one. Where was the date, the year of the voyage, where it was, where they traveled to, and what happened on the voyage. And those are the lists of dates. As you can see, they were an extremely busy group of people, led by Zheng, but also accompanied by other eunuchs, some of whom also on their return left documentary accounts of their voyage. By the way, the one I've highlighted in red, 1421, is that year in which Gavin Menzies claims they reached both Australia and the Americas. Funny that they didn't mention it in this inscription. In the 19th year of Yongle, so this is in 1421, this is our year, right? In the 19th year of Yongle, commanding the fleet, we conducted the ambassadors from Hormuz and the other countries who had been in attendance at the capital for a long time back to their countries. The kings of all these countries prepared even more tribute than previously, right? So that there's our ultimate destination, the Persian Gulf, and then also a little bit, as we'll see later, a little bit down the coast of Africa. No, if they had been elsewhere, we would expect to find it in this inscription. Let's keep going. The 6th year of Xuandu, that's the date of that's the last voyage setting out. The cyclical year Xinhai, that's another way of mentioning the same date. As we go 1431 to 1432. On a lucky day, erected by the principal envoys, the grand eunuchs Zheng and Wang Jinghong, the assistant envoys, the grand eunuchs Li Xing, Zhou Liang, Zhou Man, Hong Bao, Yang Zhen, Zhang Da, Wu Zhong, and the commanders Zhu Zhen and Wang Hong. So an expedition led by eunuchs, leaving as they set out on their final voyage this stone inscription on the coast of Fujian. Why the coast of Fujian? Why this inscription at all? We'll come back to that later. But as you can see, I don't know whether, here's another question. Some of you had read the 1421 book. I wonder how many people saw the PBS documentary, a dramatized life of Zheng He. It's there on YouTube, or it's there online somewhere. The opening scene is a nighttime scene with officials racing to burn the documents that recorded the voyage of Zheng He. And there are some hints that something like that might have taken place. But the implication drawn from this possible burning of certain documents was that the entire documentary record was lost. That was what enabled people like Gavin Menzies to construct this story around a hole and around an absence of evidence. But I think we've already seen that there is no absence of evidence. There is an abundant documentary record. So this is the stele left as they depart on their final 7th voyage on the coast at a minor location on the coast of Fujian, opposite Taiwan. Let's look at a map now. The other thing that Zheng He left behind, or rather his team left behind after their final return, were maps of where they'd been. And again, the United States and Australia don't appear on them. To find them, we need to look, the originals don't survive, but a 1621 military encyclopedia, the so-called Treatise on Military Preparedness, does survive by an author called Mao Yuanyi. Now, it also doesn't survive in its original version. And the one I'm going to put on the screen now is a 1792 Japanese edition. So this is, again, a very important point to make here, is that this knowledge that Zheng He brought back was not only not lost, but it was disseminated throughout East Asia. And people had access to it in Japan in the 18th century. They knew where Zheng He had been. They knew where Zheng He had been. So let's take a look. It only mentions Zheng He very briefly, but it has an explicit statement that the maps involved here are connected with Zheng He. So that the volume 238 of this vast encyclopedia that runs to 240 volumes, Navigating the Seas, At that time, Zheng He, serving the court as a eunuch, didn't fail in his mission. His charts list routes and distances and nations and lands, in detail but without error, recorded to enlighten ages to come and to commemorate his military merit. And that's the block of text that you can see highlighted on the screen there. And if we turn the page, the maps begin. So we're beginning to look at an 18th century woodblock edition of a 17th century military encyclopedia that preserves for us the maps that Zheng He's team brought back. So let's have a look. The rectangle in the center is Nanjing. The label is Huangcheng, meaning the glorious city, the illustrious city. And that's Nanjing. That's Hongwu's capital, and then subsequently the second major city in China after the move to Beijing. The other rectangle over to the right is labeled as the shipyard. It's the shipyard where the great so-called treasure ships, these enormous ships that led this fleet of 100, were constructed. And that red line that you can see snaking away is the beginning of the journey, moving, right to left across the page. That's the passage of the ships as they leave Nanjing and as they leave the shipyard. Now, as I've already said, this is a woodblock printed book, right? So each of those rectangles you can see on either side was a woodblock, right? And that's how books in China and in Japan would have been produced. That's how the original 17th century encyclopedia would have been produced. But let's begin to, and you'll also notice, I think, that there's a space in the middle. So we'll begin to put these woodblocks together and see what we get. There's the first page. So there we got Nanjing. That's what we had on the previous page, but I've eliminated the white space in between those two woodblocks. And if we turn the page and turn over to the next page and attach that one too, we begin to continue this map, to continue this path, traveling down the Yangtze River away from Nanjing. And it goes on. So there's the flip side of the same page. And I think you can begin to see what this originally was. Originally, this wasn't a sequence of woodblock illustrations. Originally, this was a scroll that unrolled from right to left and would presumably have run to something like 5 meters long, a very, very lengthy. If I didn't go to the task of putting all of these images together, that would have been very, very difficult to see. But this was originally a scroll that's been transferred from one medium to another. It's been transferred to the medium of the woodblock print. And there we go. There's that line that links all of these images together is the path that these ships took. There we go. That's the ones on the previous screen. We'll do it for a bit longer, until we get tired of this particular exercise. So how many have we got there? We've got 8. That's 8 wood blocks. We've got the line that is always there, the line that the ships passed along in their voyage. How far have we got? 8 pages through. In fact, not very far. We're just past Shanghai. Here's the first thing to notice. Now, look, on this one, we're going from right to left, right, more or less in a straight line. On this map, we've started at, do I have a pointer on here? Oh, can you all see that pointer? Pointing at Nanjing? Right. That's where we started. That's where the shipyard is. In fact, rather than going right to left, we're going left to right, down the Changjiang River, down to the mouth near where it wasn't called, there wasn't a Shanghai then, but there is now, and we've all heard of it. So there's Shanghai. That's how far they've got in eight images. Putuoshan, which is a tourist site off the coast today. About approximately there. We're not even as far as Taiwan yet. Going at that rate to get all the way to the east coast of Africa I did a rough calculation, something like 200, 400 wood blocks would be required for that. And that's the other interesting thing about the map. Not only does it rotate north and west according to the direction of the passage of the ships. In the scroll, in the original scroll, because it's a scroll, it's a long, thin document, the line of travel can only be represented in one direction. And so, effectively, north and south are rotating as you move along this scroll. That's not the only change. The scale shifts as you go. So for areas that were very, very close to Nanjing, very, very well understood, where all the place names were familiar, we get a lot of detail, we get a different scale. And the scale gradually pans out as you move along the scroll until eventually you arrive, Africa. There we go, long way to go, right? Again, where's my pointer? So we're about there at the moment. And we've got all of Southeast Asia, India, and the Persian Gulf, and the east coast of Africa still to do. Let's keep following the story along a little bit further. Here, I don't know how well you can see the images here, but again, the dotted line is the line followed by the ships. Now, there are alternatives in this particular case. There's another one, the second one there, but they're still following the Chinese coast. This location is the location where that inscription was placed. So the maps record the location, the temple, in fact, where that stone inscription that we saw on the previous screen it was and is located. Here's Canton, modern Guangdong province. Hong Kong Island is somewhere around there. It's not labeled as such, but it's probably one of those small blobs that you can see on the screen. So we're still, we're now, after leaving the coast of China, we then moved down the coast of Vietnam, and there are a number of bifurcations in the route, splits in the route, alternative paths that one can take. And of course, this map is a summary of all 7 voyages put together, of all of the paths that were taken on these 7 different voyages. So that's why there are multiple routes represented in it. And once we leave, well, by the way, while we're in China, while we're going down the coast past Fujian, past Taiwan, off to Canton, past Hong Kong, all the place names are Chinese place names, and most of them are still here today. Easy to match up. But as soon as we leave China, as soon as we start passing into Southeast Asia and then ultimately into the Indian Ocean, the names are foreign but represented in the Chinese script. And that has been one of the scholarly challenges in interpreting these documents once they began to attract attention, was matching up these Chinese pronunciations with what we think were the historical pronunciations of place names along the route. It's an entertaining exercise. Let's see how we do. There are 3 on here, right? The first one, Chihuahua. Any guesses? Java. Okay, so dead easy. Some of them are extremely straightforward, and so the Chinese pronunciation matches the contemporary name. Here's a slightly more difficult one. Manlaga. What have we got? I think I heard of Manchuria. Malacca. Okay, brilliant. There we go. Somebody who knows how you get from Southeast Asia to the Indian Ocean via the Straits of Malacca. Where in between Malaysia, the words Malaysia and Singapore, is a labelled point, Malacca, pronounced Manlaja or Manlaga. Last one, Sumandala. Yeah, pretty good. So it's actually being used to refer to the northern end of the island that's now referred to as Sumatra. But yeah, so there are names on these maps that can be very readily matched up. So again, don't let anyone tell us that we don't know exactly where these people went. The documentary record is extremely detailed. I've just put 3 examples. This entire map is spattered with Chinese place names in the original map that's preserved in the 17th century encyclopedia. These are pretty easy too. Bangala. Bengal, right? Bengal or Bangladesh. It's preserved in both of those names, where, incidentally, one of Zheng He's expeditions managed to resolve a succession crisis amongst the kings of Bengal on their visit. They got up to similar things in Xilan, again, not particularly difficult, Sri Lanka, right? Xilan, or Ceylon, as it used to be referred to as. Interestingly, have we got the image? The Japanese edition, this would never have happened in a Chinese text, but the woodblock cutter has mistranscribed Sri Lanka. It's a minor point, but the characters appear. Where are they? There we go. He's written Tanglan instead of Xilan. But anyway, so there we go. On the right-hand side is a blow-up of the island of Sri Lanka, with several features prominently displayed. 2 Buddhist temples. Yeah, the Hall of the Buddha up here, and the Hall of the Buddha down at the bottom. And this object that you can see on the screen was something that Zheng He was bringing with him on his voyage. This he had made before he set out. And I should say also, he'd been to Ceylon, Sri Lanka previously, and had not had a particularly pleasant exchange with the ruler at the time on his first voyage.